Hi, I'm Bobby Gilstrap, and today we're going to be talking about transparency and the entities of the Southern Baptist Convention. I have joining me today Rhett Burns, who is a pastor in South Carolina, pastor of just a normative sized church. They run about 90 on a Sunday there, and so he's not a mega church pastor with a considerable so-called influence in the convention, but he proposed a motion last year at the Southern Baptist Convention that we have at least enough financial transparency of our entities reporting back to the messengers of the Southern Baptist Convention as what you would find on the Form 990, which is reported to the IRS by nonprofits. And many nonprofits, in fact, most nonprofits do this reporting. Some of nonprofits that are connected to churches still report. They use this form to report. It's a good tool for accountability, that kind of thing, for their board and for their trustees and for their donors, that kind of thing. And also some churches, believe it or not, some churches choose to report just because they want to have that additional transparency. But it's not required. The IRS does not require it. And Rhett, as you will see in just a moment, he is not saying that we ask all of our entities to start filing this with the IRS. He's asking for a level of transparency that would be similar to what they have. So joining me today as we join in this discussion is Rhett Burns. Rhett, we are glad to have you joining us from South Carolina.
Glad to be here. Thanks so much for having me on, and thanks for drawing some attention to this issue, significant one in Southern Baptist Convention. So I appreciate it.
Well, I'm glad to have you here because you have been quite invested in trying to help bring more transparency to our convention. As you and I were talking kind of backstage before we came live, one of the things most normative sized churches, most normative pastors included, would be thinking is, why is this an issue? Why should it be an issue? Because in my church where I serve, and you and I both agreed in our churches where we're serving right now, basically everybody knows the compensation package. They know what's going to be going to retirement. They know what's going for insurance. They know what the actual cash salary is, any kind of housing allowance set up. All that kind of thing is all very open and very clear, very transparent. And in most churches, when they disclose isn't the right way, when they present a budget or a budget report in a monthly or quarterly meeting, they have a breakdown of how monies are being spent and how it's being used. Now, that doesn't mean they give a check for check disclosure, but it's very clear exactly these are monies being spent for this part of the mission, that kind of ministry, that kind of thing. So let me first start by just asking you, tell us what really connected you, what engaged you with the need for this additional level of transparency than what we're receiving right now from our entities?
Sure. Well, I would say it's a few things. One is just in watching last several annual meetings, whether for watching the stream when I wasn't able to be there, or the last several where I was able to attend in person, and seeing where attempts at gaining just a little bit more financial transparency from our entities were rebuffed. That is one, I would say, frustration maybe. But also I think more broadly speaking is that I believe that our Great Commission cooperation in the Southern Baptist Convention runs on trust. And we have a pretty big deficit of trust in the Southern Baptist Convention right now for a number of reasons. But one of those significant reasons is the issue of financial transparency. We are a financial partnership for the purpose of missions and theological education. And so we need that kind of trust when it comes to our money. And it's not there. And we've seen efforts to get a little bit more transparency be rebuffed. And so that's one of the reasons I wanted to make this motion was I think it's a good way to go about getting kind of minimum levels of transparency from our entities. And so that's the motivation. I think this is a way to restore trust. I think one way we see that's possible is that this that calls for more financial transparency. It has pretty broad support within the Southern Baptist Convention from different coalitions, so to speak. that it's not just an issue for kind of one wing or one segment of our convention, but there's broad appeal for it. And so I think it can help us restore trust, and restoring trust can help us keep on mission to reach the world with the gospel, good news of Jesus Christ. And that's really what we're about. And this is a means to serve that.
Yeah, no question. Well, I want us to kind of break this apart just a little bit. So let's begin by, I want to jump on just for a second, a tweet you put out right after you had met with the executive committee finance team just a couple of weeks ago now. The motion that you presented at last year's annual meeting was brought to the executive committee, and this is a normative process, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when a motion's brought in that meeting, a motion could be voted on, but oftentimes it's referred to the executive committee, or it's referred to the North American Mission, or referred to whatever the entity is to be able to deal with, right? So this motion was sent to the executive committee to be dealt with. So this was the first time it had been brought for discussion among the executive committee and for action, and for them to determine how to dispose of that. And so what you posted was, yesterday I had the opportunity to speak to the SBC Executive Committee's Finance Committee in favor of a motion I made in New Orleans to require 990 level financial disclosure from our entities. Now, here's a close-up of the actual motion. We're not going to try to read all of that right now, but I do want you to be able to address in part exactly what is involved in this. So I want us to be able to take just a moment to kind of walk through some of this as we talk about the 990. To start with, the 990 form is not something that most people are familiar with unless they have been working with a nonprofit. The thumbnail that I use is that our entities are less transparent than even Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood is a nonprofit, and they have to file this 990. Our entities are not even that transparent. So this is a copy of the form, and there's a lot of things here that you're not recommending that we do. In fact, there's a whole list of schedules. I went to the IRS website, and this is from the IRS website, and there are all these schedules for different things. And as you see, Schedule C is about political campaign and lobbying activities. I would hope that our entities are not involved in any of that for sure. But let's walk through a couple of these and let you respond to them and how they would be applied. Now, again, we're not asking the entities from your motion, what you're presenting, we're not asking the entities to file the 990. We're asking for that level of transparency. So Schedule B is a schedule of contributors. This is one of the areas that those who have opposed this have said, wait a minute, we don't want to be revealing who the contributors are to our entities. So how do you respond to that opposition?
Well, I would say I completely understand a couple of things. One, I understand why some people would want to know, who is giving to our entities in large amounts. But as far as the Schedule B goes, which is just a list of individual donors, that was specifically excluded by the motion. We want to protect that interest in privacy for your regular donors. And so I could understand, you have somebody who is working for a large corporation, they make a donation to one of our entities, to the ERLC for something with, pro-life related or something, and they don't want their name out there to get in trouble with their corporation. I don't want their name out there for that reason either. And this motion specifically excludes that. And so that one's a fairly easy objection to deal with.
Right. Yeah. And that can be easily removed as far as you're not wanting that to be reported in that way. Schedule D talks about supplemental financial statements. This would be providing the required reporting for, as you see the list here, donor advised funds. Look down a little further, escrow and custodial accounts or arrangements, endowment funds, supplemental financial obligations. What do you, is this something that you would want to be a part of this reporting or not?
I would say it depends. So the way the motion reads is that anything that would be disclosed to the public on a 990. So if you go to GuideStar and you look up a 990 for any institution, any nonprofit that's currently filing that, all the stuff that would be normally made public, we are asking that level of information to be made public. And the motion specifically excludes any information, such as like the Schedule B we referred to, that would not normally be made public. And so that's kind of where the line is on those type of things. I think the thing when you're considering foundation gifts and donor advised funds, kind of larger gifts, and I believe anything that would be on the 990, I'm off the top of my head, I can't remember the exact threshold, but these are large gifts that it's talking about. I think the concern there is when you have large amounts of money, or if you have large amounts of money coming in from outside foundations, then what you have is you have competition with the cooperative program, and the danger there is mission capture, mission drift. And so I think messengers have an interest in that. And so if those schedules would normally be made public, then they would be included on there. The ones like Schedule B that are not normally made public with the 990 would be specifically excluded, and I think rightfully so.
Well, and many churches and those in our churches, particularly the normative size churches, are not familiar with the business and financial plan of the SBC. They may hear about the Constitution, those kind of guiding documents, but the business and financial plan is a very significant document for Southern Baptists. Mm-hmm. How would you see this particular part of that kind of transparency to be supportive or in conflict with the current financial business plan?
I mean, I think I don't think it'd be in conflict with it. The way the motion reads is it would amend the business and financial plan to include this. And so within 6 months of the end of the financial year, that the entities would provide this level of financial information. We have some financial reporting already. It falls below the threshold, I believe, of the 990. And so this would kind of raise us up to what I believe is kind of minimum industry standards, for a lack of a better way of saying that.
Well, now, and you hit on an important thing here, because some of the pushback that I've seen online, but also from other reporting, some of the pushback has been like from leaders and entity heads and even some supporters of not doing this, has basically been that we already report. We already report. There's already plenty of reporting. You have the book of reports. You have the annual report that each of the entities give, that kind of thing. And there are numbers being reported in that. So
Sure.
Why isn't that enough?
Sure.
Why is that insufficient?
So that's what I would say. The word insufficient is what comes to mind. I don't want to act like we don't report anything at all. That's not true. We do have reports in the annuals. We do have the ministry reports that the executive committee released not too long ago. But what you see in there is even on the things where there's a lot of overlap between the 990 and say what's in the annual. What you get in the annual isn't quite in the same detail as you would get in the 990, and then it also lacks things like executive compensation. And here's the deal with executive compensation, or compensation of officers and trustees and key employees and things like that.
Let's jump on that in just a second, Rhett, because
okay.
we're going to come to that here in just a second.
Okay.
So in fact, I tell you what, as we're transitioning to that, let's go ahead and look at the next schedule as we get to that, because we are going to look at the compensation schedule here in a moment. But Schedule I is grants and other assistance to organizations, governments, and individuals in the U.S. This has to do with their reporting about information they get on grants and other things. The Southern Baptists, according to our business and financial plan, are not supposed to be raising money, not supposed to be finding financial sources, basically places outside of the SBC and our cooperative program. And there has been reporting, in fact, it's documented, that our North American Mission Board, when they formed the SEND network, they started soliciting the government to be able to get hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in money from the government to help support their effort. There have been a lot of people that were very upset about that. They're very uncomfortable with that. Would this be something that would be included in the kind of reporting that you're talking about?
As far as I know, it would, because it would be what's normally made public. And so I do think, messengers have an interest again, because money always comes with strings. And so we need to know what large amounts are coming with strings, that could be, don't want to say it definitely is, but could be in competition with cooperative program and our interests in our Great Commission partnership.
Okay. And it could, manipulation, lots of other things. Okay. Here's the compensation schedule. This is Schedule J on the Form 990, again, from the IRS website. I'm just screenshotting these. Organizations that file the 990 use this schedule to report compensation information for certain officers, directors, individual trustees, key employees, and highest compensated employees, and information on certain compensation practices. How does this play in from what you said earlier? This is something that we would want to have a part of this kind of reporting. So unpack that and tell us why.
Sure. I would say the first reason is not because we're upset, or I don't think anybody's upset that people who run large organizations make a large salary. I think a laborer is worthy of his wages. That's not the issue. It's not a morbid curiosity into how much money somebody makes, but rather the metric of executive compensation is one of those things that messengers can use, or donors to a nonprofit organization can use, in order to evaluate the financial health of a nonprofit, but also to evaluate the trustees. And so I think this fits well within the purview of messengers, because messengers appoint the trustees. And so this is one of those mechanisms by which we can evaluate trustee boards. And I think that's something that we really need in Southern Baptist life right now, in order to, just kind of basic measure of good governance and accountability, but also as a means to restore that trust we were talking about earlier.
Okay, unpack that a little bit. How do you see this being an accountability issue? How does reporting? I understand seeing what the top executives make is important, in the sense of making sure that they're not being overpaid, excessively. Let's say it that way, excessively paid, that kind of thing. And I'm with you. Somebody in these kind of roles should be paid well. Sure. No doubt. They're huge organizations, lots of responsibility. So I'm okay with that. But excessive payment is a problem with our mission money, obviously. But what other ways of accountability are there issues related to the board, the trustees? How do you see this unpacking?
I would say two things there, or two things come to mind. One is it evaluates how trustees make some of the decisions. So if you have, and I'm not saying this is the case, this is just, an example that could be, if you have an entity where revenues are going down and trending down, but executive compensation is trending up and trending up significantly, then there needs to be some questions answered there. And that is a means by which messengers can keep trustees accountable on that. And then the other thing is if you have some conflicts of interest, we might talk about this a little bit later with the Schedule L, but if you have trustees that are also having contracts with entities, then that presents some issues as well. And so I think this is an opportunity to kind of just put all those things in the light. Maybe there's nothing there at all that's conflicting, but maybe there is. And either way, that's the reason that the standard on the 990 is to have these things listed and have these questions answered, so it can put donors at ease and know that things are all on the up and up.
Well, it says something about the decision making of your board relative to the way your top employees are being compensated. Is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely.
Kind of in a nutshell.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I think, and also on that, our current financial and business plan says that a messenger can request the salary scales for an entity, and at the request of the finance committee of the EC, just to see how that works. I did that, and so me and a couple of friends, we split it up and we tried to contact the entities, and we got the salary scales from 3 of our entities, and then the others haven't responded, or contact information was out of date on website, or have responded and said they'll get back, and they haven't. And so I think what you see there is, one, it's hard to get that information. 2, once you get it, it's not really helpful, because it's either a third party kind of giving you a range of something. One of them even said, the current uppers and lowers on the scale do not meet current actuals. And so it really wasn't a scale at all. And even so, it's base salary is not total compensation, which is what the 990 requires. And so again, the level, we do have some reporting there, and it is available. And if you send enough emails and you make enough promises not to put anything out in public, and you do all of those things, you can get a scale for salaries, but it still doesn't. It's still insufficient information to really hold anybody accountable.
Well, especially when it says in our documents that this is supposed to be information that's available to any member of any Southern Baptist church. Mm-hmm. The most that should have to be done is say, well, we just need the church clerk in your church to verify you're a member.
Yeah. And for the ones that responded, that's basically what they did. And I applaud them for it. And I understand there's got to be a little bit of validation, verification process in there.
Sure.
But at the end of it,
the big issue,
information.
Yeah, I was going to say the big issue is that's information that should be made available, and it's not. And even what was it in the Nashville Annual Meeting? I think it was when the pastor came to the floor. It was a Tennessee pastor, if I remember right. And he came to the floor, and in the Ezel's report for North American Mission Board, he confronted him and said, look, I called your office. I've tried to contact them, trying to get this salary structure information. And they told me that the last option I had was to bring it to the floor in the annual meeting. So I'm doing that. He passed it off to the chairman of the trustee board. He danced around for a minute, and then basically it went away. In a meeting with, I believe it was West Tennessee pastors in an area, this pastor showed up and asked again, said, look, I want to know this information. And he was basically told, according to what he personally reported back, that he personally said that Kevin Ezel responded to him, hey, look, we get, the majority of our income from like 90% of income, something, I don't remember the exact numbers, but from like 11% of the churches. And so, keep your money, doesn't matter. If you don't want to give, then don't give. And just that kind of a flippant attitude was just like astounding to me when I saw that report. But this would be put in place to say, hey, look, this is required, and we need to see what those compensation levels are, what those structures are, especially of the top level employee. You're not asking for salaries of everybody employed in the entity, right?
No.
I mean, it's just the top
level. What the 990 requires is your officers and your trustees, your key employees. Your key employees are those who meet certain conditions. They make $150,000 or more. They control 10% of the budget. They control 10% of the assets or activities, and they're one of the top 20 out of the whole organization. So there's a lot of, so your Greek professor at seminary is probably not on that list.
Right.
And so it's not everybody. It is probably at the top level. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. It's the top level.
But the other thing I would say there, it's just, this is standard procedure for so many other nonprofits, including state Baptist universities. So we have 3 state Baptist universities here in South Carolina, and you can go on and you can look up their 990 and you can find out all that information, and it hasn't negatively affected them. They're doing really good work. They're retaining top talent. They are recruiting top talent, and they're doing a great job, and it hasn't hurt them.
Right. Okay. Well, let's look again at the next schedule. Let's see. We just looked at compensation, so let's move on. Non-cash contributions is Schedule M. This is the reporting of the types of non-cash contributions that are received during the course of a year. Certain information regarding such contributions. Is that something that would be requested, you think, in this kind of disclosure?
I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm not terribly familiar with the Schedule M, and so if we go to the Schedule L, I can talk about that a little more intelligently. But I don't want to say too much about the M because I'm not an accountant. I'm not an expert on that one.
Right. Well, and I understand. In fact, we should have had that disclaimer at the beginning across a big screen that we're both pastors. We're both ministers. We're not accountants. Although some pastors have been accountants and could probably do better with this, or even a lawyer. The best I understand this one is, people oftentimes, and the only reason I say this because I was the director for a foundation for a period of time. And so we receive non-cash contributions. So somebody dies and we would receive a house that would have been given to us in their estate planning. Someone, it happens a lot with estate plans, but somebody, gives a car, somebody gives a property, somebody gives, there's all kinds of things that would be a non-cash donation. And those things, one, they can be, I guess the good term is flipped. They can be flipped and sold, and then the cash value be used and invested or whatever they want to do with it at that point. And obviously, they could utilize that for whatever other purposes they might want, depending on what that non-cash contribution is. My suggestion is, yes, this would be something that would definitely want to be a part of that. But again, if that's not something you've addressed directly, it's not. Well, let's
I would say the line there in the motion would be all that's normally disclosed on the 990 to the public. And so if that falls in there, then it would be. If it doesn't, then it doesn't.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Okay. Address the Schedule L. I didn't do a screenshot of that one, but recap that real fast and tell us why that one's important.
Yeah, just real quick. So this is one of the things the 990 does is it evaluates or has questions about or asks for statements on conflicts of interest. And so, does the entity have a conflict of interest policy and things like that? And then it has the Schedule L, which is compensation for what it calls interested persons. And so this is your officers and your trustees mainly. And so it just shows if there's any transactions with your trustees going on. And so it could just, again, it kind of highlights, are there any, Schedule L doesn't, necessarily mean it's a conflict of interest, but it does show what those transactions with interested persons are. And again, that's just a basic accountability measure, good governance, opportunity for messengers to exercise that kind of accountability for the trustees that they appoint,
which would be important again. And again, understanding that we're right now, and for many, many, many years, we have been a trustee type organization where these trustee boards are to give guidance and hold accountable and all those other kind of things for those entities in response to the messengers. But what the accusation has been quite frequently now in the last 4 or 5 years is that the trustee boards are not doing that job, that's not what's happening. Therefore, we're not seeing the kind of transparency that we need to see at that point at all. And so that's part of what's being real concern, kind of at this point. Well, let's jump ahead just a little bit. This last week, the Baptist Review published an article. They've actually done 2 articles, but this particular article was a case for financial transparency by Dr. Garrett Robinson. And they published an opposing article that was opposed to this kind of a motion for 990 transparency. But I wanted to just highlight one paragraph. It's the next to the last paragraph that he wrote. And it simply says, when I see the standard of accountability that secular corporations and nonprofits hold and compare it to the current state of disclosure among our Southern Baptist agencies and institutions, I am saddened that we have such a low bar. Do you agree with that? Do you concur with that? What would you add to his statement?
Sure. I would, again, this is just one thing I've tried to stress over and over again is I want us to meet the minimum. And for, regular nonprofits that don't have, the reason that our entities do not file a 990 is they fall within the church designation or church-related, convention-related designation with IRS, which I'm happy for and fully support and glad, and we don't want to file with the government. But other nonprofits of similar scale file 990s, and it's kind of the minimum, level of transparency that helps donors evaluate financial health and trustworthiness of an organization. And so the fact is, all these other, both worldly, secular nonprofits and also other religious ones, Christian ones as well, they all meet this minimum standard, but we don't. And our entities do not meet that. And so rather than leading the way, as I believe Christians ought to do, part of our Great Commission task, rather than leading the way, we are lagging behind. And that's why I would encourage us to be able to, one, vote on this in Indianapolis and to vote for it and pass it so that we can meet that minimum standard. Because right now, other organizations have much more transparency than we do. Again, it's not that we don't have any transparency. I don't mean to throw that accusation out, but it's we don't have sufficient transparency. And that's what we're going for. And even with the 990, I think Ryan Hutchinson put it in his article yesterday, and I would agree that the 990 doesn't solve everything. You can file a 990 and still misuse and misappropriate funds and make bad decisions and all of that. We understand that. But if that's true at the 990 level, it's also true when you don't even meet that minimum standard.
Yeah. And just a note, I'll go back and we'll link both of those articles in the comments, or not in the comments, but in the description of the video, so people can go back and look at those and read their entire argument. One of the things that I personally have been a little surprised at was the kind of pushback against having more transparency. And that's come from it's come from some expected sources, those who would have to do that. And, one of the arguments has been, well, that would just overwhelm our accounting departments and it would just be so much more work. And we just, we're too thinly staffed and that kind of thing. And what's a good Southern term we can use for that? That's a bunch of hoo-ha. That's a bunch of punk. That's a hogwash. That's a good one. I figured maybe you could help me with it.
Here's the thing I would say on that, and I can appreciate. Yeah, I mean, it is going to add a little bit more work, but any organization, including our entities that are already doing audits and already doing kind of corporate level financials that they are doing, then this information is kind of right there already. I spoke with a friend. She runs a fairly large nonprofit in DC. And asking her about the 990 stuff. And she's like, yeah, that information's there if you're already doing those type of financials. And so one thing that's been odd to me as I've listened to some of the pushback is that in the same, in the same speech or the same spiel, you'll hear somebody say, that's way too much work. It'll be way too expensive. It's so time consuming. It would be a burden on our entities. And then at the same time, they'll say all that information is already out there and available if you know where to look. Well, those two things can't both be true at the same time. We are exempt from, the law to file the 990. We're not exempt from the law of non-contradiction. So we can't say two things that are, that can't be true at the same time, which is what I've heard. And so if that information is already available, then it shouldn't be an issue to do it. If it's not already available, then we shouldn't say that it is. I think the issue is some of it is available, and it is. You go to the annual, you can find some program level financials. You won't find all of it, but you can find a good bit of it there. But you're not going to find the conflict of interest stuff. You're not going to find top contractors. You're not going to find executive compensation. And those are some of the other kind of minimum standards that help donors, help messengers evaluate trustee boards, and evaluate trustworthiness, and evaluate kind of financial health.
Well, and there are things that would not be reported that we would still need the other kind of reporting is what I'm trying to get at, because things like North American Mission Board is always reported on the, baptisms and number of churches and, church plants and, those kind of things. That's historically been their part of their reporting. That's not the kind of things you'd be reporting in the 990 type of reporting, even though North American Mission Board this year's annual meeting report, if you'll notice in 2024, they didn't report any baptisms at all. They just stopped reporting that. Why? I don't know. I think that's part of their primary mission. Okay, I can get off on a tangent. Let's don't do that. We were talking about opposition to this. Okay, so let me just bring up real quickly one of the threads of opposition that came up was this pastor had mentioned referring to the article that Baptist Review had done in opposition to the transparency type of a motion. And he used this phrase, which I wanted to get a response from you on. He said, Southern Baptists have robust financial checks in place. Do you consider our financial checks that we currently have in place to be robust?
And I think that's where, everything hinges on that word robust in that sentence. I think it would be better said to say we have some financial checks in place. And I believe that those financial checks are insufficient for the task of what messengers need to do to be able to evaluate our entities and evaluate our trustees. And so I would take issue with the word robust there, because I believe they don't meet the minimum standards of the 990 level information. And so I think that's where the difference is.
Okay. So, and I agree. The thing that drew me to that was the word robust. You're exactly right. A big issue. Okay. So let's wrap up with this. What are the next steps? What do you see that the folks, in our churches need to do? How do they need to help with this? What do we anticipate being the next steps that need to happen to see this kind of transparency take place?
Sure. I'd say two things. One, just kind of update where it is in the process. And so the motion was made in New Orleans. It was referred to the executive committee. The executive committee, they originally were going to take it up in September, and then did not take it up in September officially in the finance committee meeting. I think there's probably some discussion with entity heads at that meeting, but then officially it was taken up in February's meeting. I was invited to attend that and speak for a few moments and answer questions. Very grateful for that. Finance team, very kind in that. I appreciate Adam Wyatt, who chairs that committee. I think he's been fair and open with me, and so I just want to note that as well. That committee then, after I got to present about it and answer a few questions, and after an entity head was asked to address some of those remarks as well, they then went into executive session. And I couldn't help but chuckle when I thought they were dealing with transparency behind closed doors. Having said that, I realize why they would want to be able to speak freely and not have reporters, not have other committee members, or not have entity heads kind of looking in. It's a big committee in and of itself. Give everybody a fair opportunity. I get it. And so they did that.
The executive, that was kind of an executive session that was only their committee members.
Just their finance committee. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
And then what they decided in that executive session is that they're going to wait until their June meeting in order to take any action on the motion. And so I believe that June meeting is the Monday prior to the Southern Baptist Convention annual meeting in Indianapolis. And so they'll take it up in their June meeting that day, and they'll recommend some sort of action. And so I can only speculate about what they might do. I think what they might do, and this is just me totally reading between the lines, I haven't been told this. I think they're going to try to propose an alternative plan, which takes the currently available information and makes it more easily accessible, which, again, I think that's a really good idea. I think it's an insufficient idea. But if that's part of it, I'm happy for that. Though I still want to insist on 990 level transparency. Therefore, I would say for what people can do, one, you can contact, particularly your state members of the executive committee, but you can contact members of the executive committee and let them know. You can talk publicly about the need for it. And I would say just as you do that, try to be as accurate and informed on that as you can. We don't want to say, we don't want to argue for transparency and misrepresent what entities are saying or reporting. And so I'd say do that in an informed way, but talk publicly about why we need this minimum level of transparency. And then lastly, I would say show up. We need messengers in Indianapolis for a lot of things, a lot of important things going on this year. One of which is, Lord willing, we get a chance to vote on this motion. And so that's one thing that I am that I really want to emphasize, and I emphasized to the finance committee, and would love to continue to do, which is I believe this is a decision for messengers to make. This is not a decision for the select few to make on behalf of the convention. This is a decision that messengers ought to make because it is within their purview and it's part of what they do in exercising accountability over the trustees that they appoint. And so this isn't for entity CFOs to make. It's not a decision for entity heads to make. It is a decision for messengers to make. And so my hope and my prayer is that messengers will have an opportunity, that the executive committee will give an opportunity for messengers to speak on the issue and not deny the messengers an opportunity to speak on that issue. But if that's the case and we get we get that answer, we need messengers there who will vote for financial transparency, 990 level financial transparency. And so my encouragement would be get to Indianapolis, find out how many messengers you can have from your church, and bring a full slate, because this meeting is going to be a really important one on a number of fronts. And one of those is this issue.
Yeah, it's definitely an important issue, and you're right. Folks need to be able to be there to be able to voice. Now, is it possible that this motion, as you have presented, could still be voted on?
It is possible, yes.
Okay, but the executive committee would have to bring that back to the floor exactly, or is there another? One of the frustrations many people have had in recent years, and probably historically, but particularly in recent years, is like the platform's controlling, not calling on microphones and, manipulating what's happening. And so that people can't really speak to it, and, referring things off, and just all kinds of parliamentary, shenanigans is how it's viewed, to prevent it from happening. So if the executive committee, do they have to bring this exact motion back? Or if they bring something alternate, like you suggest, a substitute type of a motion, could this motion still be presented to be voted on instead of whatever their substitute motion might be?
So here's how I understand it. As it currently is, for this motion to get voted on, it would need to be voted on by the finance committee, kind of the subcommittee of the executive committee. Then they would recommend that to the full plenary session, the full board of the executive committee, who would then, they would have to vote in favor of it and recommend it and bring it out to the convention to vote on. Or they could do, I suppose they could do like they did with the law amendment last year. They could bring it out for a vote, but also bring it out with kind of the Surgeon General warning, and recommendation against it. That's possible as well. They could also, and I hope this isn't the case, but they could also kill it in committee. That finance committee could say, no, we are not bringing this out for whatever reason. And it's kind of killed in committee. There's a parliamentary procedure, I believe, in order to bring it out of committee. But again, that requires voters. And so that's why we need good turnout for that. If they do not pass it in the finance committee, I don't think they're just going to say, nope, that's it, kind of quash it and not bring anything out. I think they're going to bring something financial transparency related out. Again, that's just me kind of reading between the lines and going off, some conversations, but it hadn't been, explicitly stated, but I do believe they'll bring something out. The question is whether that's something that they bring out is sufficient or not. And I believe, you got to have you got to draw a line somewhere. And I think 990 level is the kind of the industry standard. And that's where we ought to draw that line to be able to evaluate what, if they bring an alternative plan out, does it meet, does it meet the standard or not, meet the minimum or not?
Yeah. Come up to that level. Yeah. Well, and the issue with bringing something back out of committee or any of those kind of things, parliamentary wise, many of those actions do require 2/3 who are voting in favor to bring something out like that and to be able to vote on it. It can't be just 51%. So
correct.
It has to be a significant number of folks that are present to be able to do some of those kind of actions. I'm not trying to get into all the parliamentary, but some of those things do require more than just a simple majority is what I'm saying at that point. Well, I am so glad that you have joined us today and been a part of trying to dialogue about this whole situation. And what we're doing as a convention. The transparency issue is a big deal. And I hope that you'll continue to be vocal. I'm grateful that somebody who is in a normative sized church, is not in a quote unquote powerhouse mega church of some sort, is raising the voice to say, hey, look, this is something important to those of us in our church and in our kinds of churches at that point. What would you say just in wrapping up?
Yeah, I would say one, and that's one great thing about the Southern Baptist Convention is everybody can have a voice, presuming you can get to a mic. And that really is good. And I really appreciate that about our convention of churches. More so, I would say I appreciate our mission. I appreciate what we do around the world. I served with the International Mission Board for 7 years. And, I believe in our cooperative mission. I'm grateful for the theological education I got at one of our seminaries. It was fantastic for me. Loved that experience and loved our experience with IMB. And the heart behind this is we want to see that mission go forward. We want to see the nations discipled, and we want to see Southern Baptists continue to be a part of that. And I think what I'm afraid is going to happen is more churches are going to continue to drop out of and disengage with the cooperative program, which funds our mission. And they're going to do that because the trust is broken. At the executive committee, couple of weeks ago in the interim president's report, he mentioned how over the last 15 years, 10,000 churches have disengaged from the cooperative program. Now, I don't pretend to know all the reasons for those, and I'm sure they're varied, but I would imagine that some of those reasons, and probably a significant number of those reasons, are trust was broken. And that's why they stopped giving. And if we stop giving, then we're going to be stopping sending missionaries around the world, and that's going to hamper and hinder our mission, and that's what I don't want. And so that is kind of at the heart of what we're doing with this motion. Is we want our mission to go forward, we want to restore trust, and we want to get back to our Great Commission work and partnership and cooperation together.
Yeah, there's no question that there has been a very heightened heightened awareness of the lack of transparency and some of the things that people have seen as corruption or misuse of power or misuse of gifts and funds and that kind of thing at multiple entities. I mean, we've had it happen at Lifeway, $1 million gift to the outgoing president, as CEO, seriously. And then we had the big issues that happened at Southwestern with Adam Greenway, had multiple issues that have been documented at North American Mission Board with Kevin Ezell. So there has been increasing awareness of this, and people look at it.
Yeah, and it's not just online. I think one criticism is, it's just people kind of on Twitter who are malcontents, but that's not the case. I mean, I'm sitting down in membership interviews with prospective members, and they're not wanting, they're questioning whether they're going to join our church or not because they don't want their missions dollars, their tithe dollars, going to entities that they don't trust. And so we're having to deal with it in that way at the local church level as well. And so, again, I think we need to be able to, I want to be able to look our members in the eyes and tell them your giving is going to the mission of God in the world. Your giving is going to the Great Commission. We can say that with confidence. I want to be able to look new members in the eyes and tell them that, and not have to tell them, well, you can designate your giving so that it doesn't go to the cooperative program and deal with it that way. I want them to be a part of that, because our work around the world for the Great Commission is significant and important, and our missionaries are doing great work, and we want to be a part. I want our church members to be a part of that, and I want to be a part of it with a clean conscience and with confidence. Yeah,
absolutely. I know when our leadership at the church where I'm serving right now started discussing the Annie Armstrong Easter offering, had a member very bluntly said, "I don't want to give 1 red cent to the North American Mission Board. I don't trust them, and I believe they're full of corruption. Until something changes, I want nothing to do with that." And
it's sad.
I mean, that's sadly a recurring kind of theme that's happening across our convention among many, many small churches that don't feel like they have a voice. And I think you've hit on something that's very, very important with this 990 transparency. If we can get that kind of reporting in place, and our entities will follow that, if they'll follow that, and then we hold them accountable to follow that, I think we can see some very positive things. And many in our churches would probably feel much more comfortable giving their money, knowing that the reporting is adequate and any changes have to be changed without a doubt.
Well, last thing I would say there, you asked about what people can do. I'd say pray for those who are serving on that committee, executive committee. Pray for those who will be showing up in Indianapolis. Pray that the Lord will work through us, and that we'll be in a healthy spot.
Amen. Well, we'll keep you updated here on our channel.